Asante sana Mheshimiwa Deputy President, tafadhali tunaweza keti. Your Grace, Askofu Mkuu Jackson Ole Sapit, askofu wetu mpya Samson Mburu Gashadhi, mimi nakuomba wakati unaanza safari hii umeanza na kutuombea, hasa mimi na naibu wangu. Mimi nataka nikuulize askofu, uendelee kutuombea na uendelee kuombea taifa letu la Kenya, vile tunawauliza kanisa nzima watuombee kama taifa letu la Kenya, kwa sababu taifa hii ni taifa inayomcha Mungu.
Thank you. Now, taxation has become a key issue that is really torturing many of our people in this current generation. Now, it behooves me to speak about it at this moment because it affects up to the uttermost persons in the society, and in the fact, even for the reason that the governments want to use the money for their own development, which in most cases the citizenry do not see the results of their collection, apart from just enriching themselves and making their persons to grow because of poor accountability. Governments and peoples of all civilizations, ancient and modern, have known taxation and the force of revenue. In general, methods, types of taxations, and attitudes towards taxes have not changed. From the extensive list of words used for taxes and tribute in the Bible, one can see that God's people were also acquainted with taxes. In the Bible, one of the early references of taxation is in the land of Egypt, during the 7 years of plenty, when Joseph was authorized by Pharaoh to levy a large proportion of the grain, that is a large amount of taxation, and store it for the 10 years or the lean years ahead. That is in Genesis chapter 41 verses 25 to 57. The tax rate must have been very high because Joseph stored up grain in great abundance, like the sand of the sea, until he ceased to measure it, for it could not be measured.
Hawa vijana ni watoto wetu, tumewazaa, na ni watoto wetu ambao tumewalea. Mimi nataka niwaambie hawa vijana wetu, mimi nawapongeza kwa kujitokeza na kushughulika na mambo ya taifa lenu la Kenya. Our young people have stepped forward to engage on the affairs of their country. They have done a democratic duty to stand and be recognized. And I want to tell you, we are going to have a conversation with you so that we can identify your issues and we can work together as a nation.
This is the teachings from Pharaoh, from Egypt, that actually caused Joseph to collect a lot of taxes in form of storage of foodstuff. Now, this could be done in Egypt because the Pharaoh was absolute ruler and owned the land. That is in verse 44. King David enforced another type of taxation in the form of tribute from nations and rulers he defeated in war. Thus, the slaves that were captured were also taxed, so they were consistent in slavery. So, such as the Philistines, the Moabites, the Edomites, David defeated the Philistines and subdued them, and Joram brought with him articles of silver and gold, of bronze, David took from him 1,700 horsemen and 20,000 foot soldiers. And the rule was, if you defeat me in war, I will take you as my slave and I impose heavy taxation on you. Now, forced labor of captives or chain gangs was another kind of taxation or tribute, such as Solomon used in building the temple, and this is the account of the forced labor which King Solomon levied to build the house of the Lord and his own house and the walls of Jerusalem. But of the people of Israel, Solomon made no slaves. Solomon must have introduced a tax system into his own country according to 1 Kings chapter 4 verse 7. Solomon had 12 officers all over Israel who provided food for the king and his household. Each man had to make provision for 1 month in the year. So far as is known, this is one of the first time the people of Israel was subject to taxes. Prior to this, support of the government came from the booty and the captives of war. Solomon also obtained revenue from traders and caravans. Understand this, apart from the issue of tithe, taxes was only gained from slaves and the people who have been captured from war. Let's proceed. Israel and Judah often were forced to pay taxes or tribute to the enemy countries around them who conquered them. So in return, when Israel was captured as slaves, they were also forced to pay taxes. Like the Assyrians, Egyptians, Babylonians, and the Persians, that is 2 Kings chapter 18, verses 13 and forward. The Pharaoh of Egypt placed Judah under heavy tribute, and Joachim precisely taxed Judah to pay the tribute. 2 Kings chapter 23, verse 33. In ancient times, many governments were taxing their people to pay tribute to a foreign power. Heavy taxation leads to rules and regulations to commitment to foreign powers. The Persians introduced a method of taxation which became widely used in later history. The provincial governor of a conquered country was forced to pay a certain amount of taxes each year to the occupying power, and he in turn collected these taxes from the people of the provinces in various ways. So here we learn that taxes was actually imposed on slave servitude, forced labor, and even to impress the foreign powers. So heavy taxation was imparted on the common man. And that we can also see in Ezra chapter 4, verse 13. Now, perhaps the beginning of tax exemption for religious purposes began in Ezra's time. It shall not be lawful to impose tribute, custom, or toll upon any one of the priests, Levites, the singers, the doorkeepers, the temple servants, or other servants of the house of God. There was also heavy taxation under Persia in Nehemiah's day. He complains that the former governors before him laid heavy burdens upon the people and took from them food and wine, besides 40 shekels of silver. Nehemiah chapter 5, verse 1 to 15. This taxation was commonly known as bread for the governor. Notice that. Now, in here times, the familiar system of farming taxes of taxes was out to the highest bidder, who had the power of the army behind him to collect all sorts of taxes was used. During GR domination, it is said that wealthy and powerful businessmen met in Alexandria each year to bid for the franchise to collect taxes from their own people. So this is something the great men put themselves aside to agree to be allocated how to collect their taxes. So it was a way of making wealth for themselves. So exorbitant profits were made from this system because the tax collector could pocket everything he could collect beyond the set amount demanded by the government. That is why Zacchaeus was accused of theft. Sometimes the amount of taxation was unbelievable. Under the Seleucids, the government demanded 1/3 of the grain, 1/2 of the fruit produced, and a portion of the temple tax itself Pompey of Rome levied very heavy taxes upon the Judean province, likewise like Julius Caesar, although he granted relief in sabbatical years according to the Jewish custom. Now, in the New Testament, under Herod the Great, taxes in power were levied on almost everything, especially on the fields. In the days of the Roman procurators in Paul, taxes were also farmed out to the highest bidder. The system finally adopted throughout the empire. The kinds of taxes grew in such numbers that both the rich and poor felt the heavy burden. There were high land or real estate taxes, poll taxes. Matthew chapter 22, verse 17. Export and import taxes collected at seaports and the gates of the cities of the country, or crop tax, or tenth of the grain pass, and 1/5 of the wine, fruit, and oil, an income tax of 1% of a man's income per year, taxes to use as a road, to enter certain towns. There were taxes on animals, taxes on vehicles, assault tax, sales tax, tax on the sale of slaves, and the transfer of property, and the emergency of taxes. This became an attitude of slavery. And remember, for Egypt to have gained to that extent, it is because taxes impoverished the children of Israel and they became slaves into serving the Egyptians. They were tormented to make sure they sustained the nation as slaves until the time God says, "Let my people go." So it is true that under the Romans, the people received law and order and land on the sea. Good roads, public buildings, market stadiums, bath batters, theaters, but the provinces were almost bled to death in the process. Besides all these taxes, the Jews were asked to pay the temple tax. If you are running a ministry, you are supposed to pay a tax on that ministry. Currently, we have income tax returns on every church. 1/2 shekel annually, called the didrachmon in Matthew chapter 17, verse 24. Every temple was required to pay a certain amount of taxes. Every Jew 20 years old from all over the world, the Gen Z of that time, paid this tax for the operation of the Holy Temple. Exodus chapter 30, verses 11 to 16. After Vespasian, when the temple was destroyed in AD 70, the Jews were required to pay the temple tax. Nevertheless, it was all a colonial way of putting people under management. Later, Rome introduced taxation through a regular census. There was a Roman high official called a censor. He tried to collect revenue the cheapest way possible. He sold tax franchise in various areas or districts to highest bidders. He set the quota for the government and gave the publicans the right to collect at an open-ended commission. Contracts were let for 5-year periods. This is the sordid, oppressive tax world in which men like Matthew, the publican, and Zacchaeus operated. They were people who allocated sections to collect tax for a rich man. They were known to cheat both the government and the taxpayer. They took bribes from the rich and permitted them to pay less taxes. Tax evasion, because even in the government nowadays, there are people who evade taxes, but the poor must pay through their food. So look at Jesus' parable of the dishonest steward. Luke chapter 16, verses 1 to 9. He was actually explaining about a man who has been given stewardship and later he diverted for his own personal gain. That is corruption. There were whole armies of tax gatherers in Paul. So it was often a family profession. Fathers followed sons, forming a castle of tax collectors. Under Judas the Galilean, the Jews rebelled against the extreme burden of taxation, but the revolt was crushed by his heavy heel of Rome in Acts chapter 5, verse 37. There was a serious revolt over taxation, but because of the strength of the military, it overpowered the people. So it is not surprising the Jews hated taxes. They had many reasons. One, publicans made fortunes of people and rich alike. Remember, this heavy taxation will always create more thieves and more conmen, more hooligans, more dealers. And these are the people who benefit more whenever there is heavy taxation in any country. Two, the method of census and censor under Rome, requiring people as Joseph and Mary to go to another city at great inconvenience and be numbered as animals just to be taxed. Number three, much of the revenue from the poor went to opulent Rome to be doled out to an idle population. Days when it was beneath the dignity of Rome's citizens to work. Four, on top of this burden, there was the annual temple tax. Collectors went from town to town once a year by the dozens collecting this tax, and in foreign countries, certain places were designated for payment. So, without a doubt, the ancient knew all about taxes. The abuse and indignities heaped upon people, especially conquered nations, is incredible. References or to taxes, toll, tribute, publicans, etc. in the scripture take on new light against this background. Some have expressed surprise that Jesus, when confronted by the dilemma of the Pharisees on taxation, uttered the very familiar dicta, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. Jesus did not want to disturb the system. He wanted to spread the gospel so that people operate from the knowledge point of view, because it is their own people who impoverish their own people by honoring to pay taxes towards the pleasing of the external forces. This is not begun yesterday, it has been there even before. And Paul also emphasized in the book of Romans chapter 13, verses 6 to 7. Inasmuch as we want to obey the society by or the governing authorities as ministers of God, we need to pay taxes. However, heavy taxation, as I have said earlier in this item, is a significance of slavery, that is servitude, obedience to colonial masters, and the feeders. We are providing feeders to the corrupt authorities, wheeler dealers, the conmen, and all evil atrocities that are in the government, which have not been solved to date. Look upon these items. My advice to the president of this nation: call upon the young men.
I am very proud of our young people. They have stepped forward tribeless. They have stepped forward peaceful. And I want to tell them, we are going to engage them. We are going to have a conversation so that together we can build a greater nation.
Because these are the people we gave birth to. The Bible says our youths are like arrows. We have sent them. And these are the people you throw tear gas, they drink them. They are resistant to tear gas. They are delivering this nation a second time. Teach them and tell them what you have. Speak the truth. You promised and you must fulfill. As a friend, as an elder, I speak this with confidence. If you speak to the youth in their mind and tell them the truth, please provide the services required. Suspend the bill and make their minds be open so that they know what they are receiving. Because what is in their mind now can never be sorted out until their desires are fulfilled. You cannot kill the people because you want an idea, your idea or your objective to be fulfilled. Teach them just the same way Solomon did, that the preacher taught his people the laws and the commands. He taught them. So teach us your ways. Don't just speak one thing today and another tomorrow. Speak one thing and stand with it as a king. God bless you, and let us handle our youths as they deserve. Killing will not offer a solution. Sit them down and talk to them. Thank you, and God bless you. Happy and blessed nation. We are a very peaceful country, and I pray we are going to stand strong together in this solidarity moment. We have always said that our youth are the leaders of tomorrow. You have denied them. These are the leaders of today, because our tomorrow, the youth of tomorrow will come. These ones were promised their leadership. They want their leadership today, and their voice must be heard. God bless you.
What I want to assure them is that we are concerned about their issues. In this year's budget, I have enhanced the budget going to CDF to increase by 10 billion so that young people can get bursary, and young people, we can build ICT hubs so that these young people can get digital jobs, because we know the challenge of unemployment in our country. Let me also tell the young people of our nation that in this year's budget also, we have increased our higher education loans board so that no child from any vulnerable family can lack an opportunity to be in a TVET or in a university on account of the ability of their parents or guardians to pay for their fees. We're going to make sure that every child has access to higher education. And I want to commit to Kenya. We are a democratic country. We build our institutions, whether it is the executive, the legislature, the judiciary, civil society. We agree that all these institutions are necessary for us to be a greater nation. And we will support all institutions to make decisions for Kenya so that together we can be a great nation. We must continue to be a peaceful, we must continue to be a nation of the rule of law so that together we can build a greater nation. So asanteni sana watu wa Nyahururu. Mimi nimefurahi sana kufika hapa. Askofu, ukikuja katika diocese hii, kuna barabara pale inaitwa Gashana. Watu wa hapa waliniuliza nitafute pesa ya kutengeneza hiyo barabara, inawasumbua sana. Mimi nishakubaliana na mjumbe wao ya kwamba hiyo barabara tuko na pesa sasa, tutaitengeneza. Hapa karibu na ofisi yako pia kuna bypass inaitwa Transcom. Hiyo bypass vile vile tutaitengeneza kwa sababu watu wa hapa wameniuliza tufanye hivyo. Na mambo yale mengine yote tutashirikiana. Mimi nataka niseme asante sana watu wa Nyahururu, tunawapenda sana. Mwathani amurathime. Mungu awabariki sana. Thank you.
Asanteni sana. Ili tufike kelele ya ibada yetu. Sasa kulikuwa na boxes ya zile gifts ambayo inaweza peanwa kwa askofu wetu, na wale watafanya hiyo kazi muweze kuendelea. Lakini sasa tunaelekea kumaliza ibada. Nitauliza askofu wetu mpya sasa aje atuongoze kwa benediction, alafu haya mengine itaendelea.